This video is about the New York and Alabama abortion laws. Abortion is a very difficult issue. It pits the right of a mother to have control of her body against the rights of the unborn to live. I have not been convinced by either side of the argument. No one is pro-abortion. It is a medical procedure that no rational person would want to undergo unless there was other compelling reasons to do it. However, a lot of people believe that if a woman becomes pregnant, she should have the right to choose to have an abortion. We all have a right to live. Life can only legally be taken under circumstances of self-defense and in some areas capital punishment. Under certain limited circumstances, the police are allowed to use deadly force, and the military is also allowed to use deadly force. The real debate about abortion is as to when in the process of being born the legal system should recognize the right to life of the unborn. Looking back in history, the original Hippocratic Oath, which was written between 400 and 500 BC, contains the sentence, "Similarly, I will not give to a woman pessary to cause abortion." Reading from the New Revised Standard Catholic Edition of the Bible, from Exodus chapter 21, verses 22 and 23, it says, "When people who are fighting injure a pregnant woman so there is a miscarriage, and yet no further harm follows, the one responsible shall be fined what the woman's husband demands, pay as the judge determines. If any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe." Based on that passage, it is clear that if a miscarriage is caused, that it is a lesser offense than if you killed the unborn. There is another passage from that translation of the Bible which further indicates that the unborn are different from the born. It is in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 5, which is, "Just as you do not know how the breath comes to the bones in the mother's womb, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything." Again, indicating that the unborn are different from the born. The fundamental reason any woman would want an abortion is because she is pregnant, and for a large number of potential reasons, she is not in a position to have the child. Before getting into the laws, there are some statistics that should be considered. I got them from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention website. 90.1% of all abortions are performed in the first 3 weeks, or the first 13 weeks of pregnancy. From week 13 to week 20, 7.6% of the remaining abortions occur. That means that 1.3% of all abortions are performed after week 20. I am unaware of any statistics that break down that 1.3%, but it would be very odd to me if someone decided to get an abortion after 20 weeks unless there is something either really wrong with the mother or wrong with the child. There is this U.S. Supreme Court case of Roe versus Wade. It essentially says that a woman can have a constitutionally protected abortion until week 26 of her pregnancy. There are those who believe with the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court that Roe versus Wade may be overturned. The way courts work is they can't really do anything until someone brings a case before them. Will Roe versus Wade be overturned? The answer to that can most accurately be guessed by consulting an 8-ball device. Neil Gorsuch, a conservative member of the court who was recently appointed, said during his confirmation hearing that if a judge does not make rulings that make the judge unhappy, then the judge isn't a very good judge. In a different case, Brett Kavanaugh said someone asking the court to overturn precedent has a very high burden. Justice Roberts would not likely want the chaos that would ensue if Roe versus Wade was overturned. So I wouldn't bet the ranch on Roe versus Wade being overturned. In a case that was just recently decided, the Supreme Court upheld an Indiana law that required the remains of an abortion to be buried or cremated. However, they refused to hear an appeal of a Seventh Circuit case that invalidated an Indiana law which forbade an abortion on the basis of sex, race, or disability. That points to the court not wanting to overturn Roe versus Wade. It should be noted that the decision I just referenced had both Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch on the court. Apparently, Clarence Thomas does want to overturn Roe versus Wade. If Roe versus Wade was overturned, then whether or not abortion was legal would be determined on a state-by-state basis. In anticipation of the potential of Roe versus Wade being overturned, New York passed what amounted to a codification of the Roe versus Wade decision. Particularly, a woman can have an abortion under one of three conditions. The first one being that she has not been pregnant for over 24 weeks. The second one is if the fetus is no longer viable. And the third one is if the woman's mental or physical health would be impaired by having the child. People had a hissy fit implying that this law would result in babies being killed. If you consider the Center for Disease Control and Prevention statistics, unless some woman was mentally ill, similar to the ones who leave their newborn babies in dumpsters, women are not going to have abortions other than as they already do under New York law. Then getting to the Alabama law. Alabama has recently passed a law that makes it so that a doctor who tries to perform an abortion will get a 10-year felony, and if they succeed in performing the abortion, it will be a 99-year felony. Interestingly, there is no penalty for the woman, just the doctor. Abortion is a complicated issue. The real issue is when in the process of being born does the state recognize your right to live? If you believe that the right starts at the fertilization of the egg, then it makes perfect sense to have no exception for rape or incest, as the Alabama law does, not have such an exception. A rare but potential hypothetical situation shows why having those exceptions would lead to an absurd conclusion. Let us assume that there was a married couple who wanted to have a child, and they were doing that what married couples do to have children. Then let us assume that the woman gets raped during that time period. She becomes pregnant. It is not clear who the father of the child is, and she decides to have the child. When the child is born, the child has characteristics that indicate that the husband was not the father of the child. Can the baby now be killed because it was the result of the rape? If you believe that the state should protect from the point of conception, then it should be irrelevant as to who the father is or the circumstances of the conception. Alabama likely passed the law so it could be challenged in court and potentially result in the overturning of Roe versus Wade. My own guess is that the Alabama law will be found unconstitutional at the Federal Circuit Court in Alabama, or at the Federal District Court in Alabama, and the Circuit Court where Alabama is will also uphold the overturning of the statute, and the Supreme Court will choose not to hear the statute, or will choose not to hear the case.